Apple alarm issues, do we all have a Microsoft problem, and new cybersecurity laws out of the UK. This is MacVoices. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Backblaze. MacVoices listeners get a fully featured no-risk free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Apple was in the, I'm trying to throw things in the chat room here. I lost the second one. Apple's also in the news for something else that I was a little surprised at this because I heard about this first, of all places, on the Today Show this morning. I had no idea that, but apparently the alarms on your iPhone have not necessarily been ringing for everyone or going off for everyone. So people have been oversleeping, getting to work late and all. I can't decide if this was just one of those social media things or whether there's an actual issue. Once again, because I haven't experienced this week. Has anybody here had issues with their alarms?
No, they've been going off for me.
Alarms.
Oh, this is why I love you, Jim.
Yeah.
Chuck, I was seeing reports of this pop up last week, and and the first reports that I saw, I thought, well, that's kind of weird. Glad I'm not having that problem. But then it kind of snowballed because once the news is out there, then it seems a lot of people started popping up saying, "Oh yeah, me too." So anecdotally, it seems to be a real problem. But I don't think we have any way today to say how widespread the issue is. When it comes to customer service, you never hear from the people that are satisfied, but you hear very loudly from the people who aren't. So having a few people complaining about this problem, which does seem to be a real problem, is not an indication that it's super widespread.
Jeff, the only thing that I did see is that Apple apparently has acknowledged it and claimed they're working on a fix. Now, I don't know if that was through official channels or what, but that was something I was seeing in a lot of the stories today. So apparently there is something going on. And there was a way, it has something to do with, I guess, the attention aspect of iOS, that if you turn that off, it seemed to fix this issue. So I'll try to see if I can find an article and put it in the show notes if you're experiencing this. But there's something under Face ID and passwords that that you're not supposed to. Let me try that again. The iPhone is not supposed to require your attention, I guess, for the alarms. You can also set it to that you have to be looking at the iPhone, obviously, for Face ID. Mm-hmm. But this had to do more with the alarms. So take it for what it's worth. Barry, thank you, Barry. That's great. It's alarming that my alarms have been going off as usual. Yeah, well, mine have too. I wouldn't mind sleeping in one day, but the alarms keep giving me away.
You say you wouldn't mind sleeping in one day, but what happens when you do finally get up that day and then you wish you hadn't slept in? Because all those people are going to be sitting there complaining to you about everything that isn't done. And Chuck, this is why we can't have nice things.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to sleep in on a day I can't sleep in, but I'd like to sleep in on the days I can. Never mind. This wonderful. I think we're a little off this time. I think missing 2 weeks, I think we're all so I don't know. This one is just for me, okay? But I also think that you guys have a hard time agreeing. This is from Wired, that the U.S. government has a Microsoft problem. And so finally somebody wrote an article about what I've been thinking for a long time, that there are all these hacks, there's this history of questionable security, and yet the government is using Microsoft and endorses Microsoft. And I know David will jump in here a little bit with some of his positive experiences. And look, there's a lot of good stuff to be said for Microsoft, but the fact that they are such a big target means that people are hammering on them harder and at times succeeding. David, do you have thoughts on this?
Yeah, they've always been a big target only because they're taking up a mass amount of the business world. I mean, we solely depend on Microsoft for many things, especially in the corporate world. So it's hard to not target them when it comes to this. The companies are highly in on their cloud services with OneDrive and with SharePoint and with all their other services. So I mean, I'm not kind of surprised that this. I'm not surprised that this is the government is having their challenges because we know how the government works. they stay behind on a lot of things and are running older operating systems and don't get things updated right off the bat. And I would be surprised there's machines out there still running Windows 7 for crying out loud on some things. I mean, how going far that back and but that's the thing with Microsoft. You don't know. It's just a big company and they have big profits.
And I have my opinions and they're kind of well known, but at the same time, just objectively, if you look at the number of times that entities or someone has been able to access things that they shouldn't have been able to access, it gets a little scary when you think what Microsoft systems are running, and for the government as well as for your company or my company or anybody's company.
Yep.
So I want to see them get their act together, and because some of this just flat out is scary in a world that seems to be increasingly dependent on computers and systems that have marginal security.
Chuck, I have a question. Do you think that it would be any different if the U.S. government was fully invested in Mac OS instead, or Red Hat Linux, or whatever the operating system is? And my feeling is that it doesn't matter what the operating system is. It matters who is using it in a case like this. So if it was all Apple products for the government, I think we would see a much higher number of vulnerabilities being exploited, or at least discovered, simply because it's the United States federal government using that platform and everyone wants to hack into it. And so you're going to have more people finding vulnerabilities.
Jeff, it's a real fair point. I guess the thing is, and Ben in the chat room, Ben Ratha, of course, couldn't be here tonight, but he's in the chat room. And he says they, meaning Microsoft, make more money being compatible than secure.
And that's a fair statement.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I come down on some of this. I feel like we look at the way Apple has approached security and look at the way Microsoft has approached security. And there's, say what you will, they are two comparably sized companies, but they just seem to have very different attitudes about this. And that's the part that scares me.
Yeah, I there's a little bit of schadenfreude when I first read that article, but then a lot of concern about the vulnerabilities, and then sort of, well, if you're a real big target, people are going to come after you, particularly if part of your target is government and possibly really sensitive material. You're going to have bad actors trying to do it. But then I thought, there should be a bigger responsibility that you take on for doing this, to making sure your target is secure. Not to say that Apple doesn't do a good job, but if everybody's all the government and civic kind of organizations are in bed with Microsoft, then Microsoft sort of has a responsibility to patch as many holes as they can find.
And they have marketed so hard to the enterprise. So I've give them a little bit of I hold them to a higher standard. If you're marketing this to the Fortune 500 companies, I would think that you darn well would be paying a lot more attention to security. And
You would
help,
think.
yeah, and help me out, guys. But Microsoft has a couple times tried to retire old operating systems, and they keep and softwares, notably Internet Explorer, and yet they keep pushing back those retirement dates, or have pushed them back several times. I don't know if any of them actually were enforced or not.
Well, Internet Explorer was. It's gone.
Internet Explorer's been gone a long time, and who uses it anyway?
Right.
Who uses?
You'd be surprised. There's
Yeah.
companies who have.
Yeah,
There's companies that have to now use
this
IE mode
article
and Edge.
is this article is not saying. Well, that's what I was looking for. Edge. How many people use Edge? This article is not saying that the problem is people using old versions of Microsoft software. It looks to me like the problem is current versions of Microsoft software.
Oh, and Jim, yes, you're absolutely right. But I guess I'm talking. I was looking at the older versions of software as an indication of the trend that seems to be Microsoft's attitude toward less secure operating systems. That's and continue to maintain those. David, sorry.
They're still extending life on Windows 7. There's still people out there who are still companies who still need to use that. They pay out of their to get support and get the security patches that Microsoft's still providing. There's still people using XP out there, crazy enough. But there's some systems out there that are still running that. Windows 10 is still going to be around for quite a while yet. You got till next year before it begins to go end of life. But no, there's still plenty of systems out there that companies just don't want to upgrade. They can't. They've got infrastructure that just doesn't allow it. I mean, luckily they came up with IE mode for Edge. So when you go to an application that requires Internet Explorer's interface to do it, the developers of those particular apps were able to at least come up with some way for them to still function, but they need to be retired.
It's interesting too that people want to use those old versions of Windows for various reasons. You don't see people like wanting to run OS 10.6. Maybe there's some people running 10.14 because they want to run 32-bit software, but not very much. So, I think Apple has done a lot better job of bringing everybody along and bringing developers along, and not everybody's running Mac OS 14, but people are not running 10, 15-year-old operating systems, and they have no desire to do so. Whereas on the Windows side, these customers, are like, yeah, I don't want, for whatever reason, they don't want to move forward with what Microsoft's got, because Microsoft's, I really don't know the reason. I'm not on that side, but
they're supporting their corporate the corporate customers that they work with.
Right, but there's plenty of corporate customers of Apple stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it's as much, but there's still a lot of it. And
I'm seeing more of the trend on the Mac side of things, that in the operating system you tend to the corporate tends to want to move on to the more current Mac OS only because of vulnerabilities. That Apple stops releasing security patches. I think it goes back to what Big Sur and older. There's no security patches, as well as browsers. I mean, Safari's going to be at its own end, depending on which version of the Mac OS you have, and same thing with Chrome. or any other browser you may use, that they're going to stop supporting it because it's just too old. Don't want to spend the resources to develop that browser for that version.
Well, I go back to Ben's comment, and David, you just said it. Microsoft is making beaucoup money doing those security patches for old things. Ben's comment was they make more money than being compatible than secure.
Right.
So, and you can argue that a security patch at least is an attempt to make it secure, but
it's
but ideally, customers would not want to. Customers are wanting to stay on old systems because it's too hard for them. They've written something that apparently doesn't work with the newer systems. So I think Apple's done a bit, even though Apple's done these major transitions, like change from 32 to 64-bit and change from Intel from PowerPC to Intel to Apple Silicon, but they don't seem to have this problem that developers aren't bringing their stuff forward.
Well, I think we all probably have had friends or people approach us, and they had something in an old AppleWorks database, or something that they need help with, or they may have a piece of hardware that interfaces only with a much, much, much older Mac, and they want to keep it running. And
but on the Apple ecosystem, that's more the exception that proves the rule.
Yes.
Whereas on Windows, it seems like that's just more like the rule.
Yeah, I agreed, Jim. And you know what? If you're not putting these machines on the internet, then it's not a problem because there is no security unless you don't lock your doors. But if you're sticking it on the internet, then you're just looking for all kinds of trouble.
Agree with that.
So, yeah. Eric, you're awfully quiet. The bird got your tongue?
Well, I was going to add for reasons to run old versions of operating systems. We see a lot of people running old versions of Microsoft operating systems because it's connected to a piece of lab equipment that was calibrated to that particular version, and you can't change it without not being able to use the lab equipment. And the cost of the lab equipment is so insanely high, it's not like you could just replace it with a new computer. So you isolate the machines as much as possible, try to keep them behind firewalls and off of the network, and you kind of do what you can do for it, and those machines will be around for quite a while. How you encourage companies to maybe write machines that get updates, I don't know. If they charge a huge amount, then yeah, the incentive is to say, well, I'm happy with the version I've got and I'll live with it. And so there will always be older machines out there. I mean, I think that was one of the issues that they were having with power companies, because you get a bunch of machines to monitor like a valve, and it doesn't ever get upgraded because whoever it is that did the connection to whatever valve it's monitoring, either isn't there anymore, or the piece of software it's talking or hardware it's talking to only works with that version of Windows, and nobody updated the drivers. That's a problem all over the place. Building controls, school building controls, clocks in schools. I can't tell you the number of schools that have clocks that you can't reset anymore because the computer that's used to reset that clock system runs an old operating system that's no longer supported. So you either keep the old operating system or you have to replace all your clocks.
What kind of clock requires a computer to set it?
I was going to ask the same question, Jim.
I don't know. Somewhere in Milwaukee, it was all the clocks were all synchronized together, and whatever computer system was used to do that isn't supported anymore. So for a while, they were sending people around with cheap clocks, and they would stick clocks up on the wall, and you had the official clock that wasn't right, and the the fix for it was just glued onto the wall.
I've got an idea. Take the clocks down, and people can look at their watches or their cell phones.
Schools may not allow cell phones either.
That situation goes on in universities too, what Eric's describing. And, my son works in a chemistry lab, worked in the chemistry lab at our university, and it was a matter of finding software that would run on an old machine, or if the new software was there for the machine, was so horrendously expensive, one wouldn't run on the old machine, and it wasn't worth the cost. So they tried to keep the machines and the old software running as long as they could, just because of the expense, and not just upgrading the software, but then also having to upgrade the hardware too.
I think we're kind of, like this story was not about the U.S. government trying to use old lab equipment. The problem was modern versions of Windows were being hacked. And then Microsoft is, I guess, too big to fail. So nothing's, where have we heard that story before?
Today's MacVoices is supported by Backblaze. MacVoices viewers and listeners get a fully featured, no-risk, free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Go right now and see how easy it is to sleep better knowing your data is safe. When you get in your car, you put on your seatbelt. You don't expect to be in an accident, but you want to be safe, right? When you leave your car, you lock the doors. There probably won't be any bad guys pulling door handles to see which ones are open, but you want to be safe, right? When you store your data on your computer, you don't expect a hardware failure, or a hack, or that your computer could get stolen or destroyed in a natural disaster. But you want to be safe, right? That's exactly why I use Backblaze and why you should too. With Backblaze, your data is backed up automatically at a time and frequency of your choosing. Could be continuously, could be at 3 a.m. when your computer isn't doing anything, and hopefully you aren't either. You choose. With versioning, you can be assured that the file that you changed by mistake last week and shouldn't have can still be dropped back to. And with up to 1 year retention, if you deleted that file, you aren't sunk. But how do you get your data back? If you only need a few files or aren't in a hurry, they can be all easily downloaded through Backblaze's web, iOS, or Android apps. But if you need a whole lot of data recovered, like a full drive's worth, just order it from Backblaze and it's shipped right to your door. Return the drive in 30 days, and there's no charge for it. If all that sounds simple, it is. But find out for yourself. MacVoices viewers and listeners get a fully featured, no-risk, free trial at backblaze.com/MacVoices. Go right now and see just how easy it is to protect yourself from those nasty surprises. Backblaze.com/MacVoices. You will only ever regret not doing it. Thanks to Backblaze for supporting MacVoices. You're right, Jim. We have indeed gone down a bit of a rat hole. In fact, I was going to put Marty in the penalty box because in our private chat, he said Microsoft XP forever.
So he's just talking about the lab equipment that he can't replace.
Oh, okay.
So going back to our topic, authentication systems, that's one of the big places where brand new Microsoft hardware is being brought in because you're trying to authenticate everybody's, Linux boxes, Macs, Windows against one central database of people. So when somebody leaves, they can't log into systems anymore. That's all, Microsoft stuff at the core of it. It didn't used to be, but that seems to be where things are going. So it's not just, well, I guess you could call schools part of government, kind of, but there's the schools, government, state government, federal government. They all seem to be migrating to the just authenticate through Windows, which is a problem.
I mean, it's super convenient. Works, but then if it doesn't work, then there's what to pay. So,
but you have one test machine that somebody leaves open and accidentally lets somebody connect to it and has all the source code and everything else spill out into the wide world. And then the fact that everybody's systems are based on the same structure is potentially an issue.
I'm going to take that as a little bit of a segue to the next thing that we were going to bring up, and that is there's a new cybersecurity law coming out of the UK, and these articles related to Apple, but I felt like at least some of what I saw for a change coming out of the UK kind of made sense. Things like no default passwords, which always blows me away. I mean, the last router I bought for the last office I worked in, the default password was printed on the bottom of the router.
Oh, I laugh only because otherwise I'd have to cry.
We all do that.
Why
Walk
I don't.
any home, any little mesh router system, whatever you buy, flip it over on the bottom, and that's the password. But at least they're different on each device. It's not admin. Oops, shouldn't have said that.
So,
Uh-oh.
so educate me, and I'll point to Jim, but anybody that educate me a little bit. Why something can't be written into software, either the firmware or the software drivers, that requires you to change or set up a new password when you first fire up the device. Sort of like when you do the first installation of Mac OS. There is no default password just to go in and say, let me in. I mean, I have to create a password.
But that it's extra complexity, and it creates support problems. So, and I'm not saying people shouldn't do what you're saying; they should, but it does create problems. On the vendor side, what about people that I don't know what my password is, or, the person who set the password, they don't work here anymore. Do we believe you? That sort of thing. So it causes all kinds of knock on. Whereas if you could say, yeah, poke the button to reset it, and I guess you could do that, and it could go back to saying set the password. But it's not the easiest path. So a lot of these companies, they just want to take the easiest path. I was amazed. I recently got a new car, and I just found out that periodically, I guess they send out updates for the Now system, and you download it from the internet. And I haven't done it yet because it hasn't had an update since I got the car. But I was on a forum, and they were talking about, mentioning where the website was. So I went and looked at it, and I was very pleased to see that they do support the Mac. Okay, so you download this app, and it downloads the rest of it, and then you put it on a USB stick. But their Mac app, it's not notarized,
Huh.
and they've got instructions. Basically, here's how you turn off the security so you can run unnotarized software. This is from Hyundai, right? So, a giant, second or third largest car manufacturer in the world, and whatnot. And I guess they cheaped out and couldn't spend $100 a month. Maybe I'm not sure, or maybe they did and just But come on, this is like they hired some kid in their bedroom to make this software. So that's what happens. A lot of these places, that's software is not their core competency. It's just, oh well, we need to make this little software piece, and how can we they farm it out to somebody that they don't give a shit. And so that's how a lot of this software gets.
But Jim, first of all, one minute we want the companies to protect us from the bad guys, and the next minute we scream at them because we can't or won't protect ourselves. And I mean, I'm thinking, okay, so 1Password. 1Password is my password manager of choice. And they make very clear to me as I'm setting it up that if I lose, their authentication materials that they provide, that they can't help me, period. I just interviewed at NAB. The show's not that this episode's not out yet, but the manufacturer of some portable hard drives, SSDs, that come with a keypad, and you have an administrator password and you have the user password that for enterprise, so that if I'm a department head, I have the administrator password for all these devices, then each individual user has them. But if both those passwords are lost, I asked the question and they said, yeah, we can't help you. You can reformat the device, you can keep on using it, but the data's gone.
First of all, Chuck, I guarantee you that every day someone is mad at 1Password because they can't help them.
Oh yeah.
So, and secondly, if you bought 1Password, you went out of your way to get a product that's specifically about passwords. So hopefully you're more likely to, pay attention. But, and notice that, oh, here's this thing. Then, like for some, random device. And so, people get their modem or their whatever it is, and they're just like, I want to get going. And, I'm not thinking about security or whatever. I just want to get this box working and move on to the next thing. And, my product, you set it up and there's an account and you set up a password. And we definitely get people that, are like, hey, I don't remember what my password is. Like, yeah, we told you to remember it. And, they want me to tell them what it is. It's like, no. Now, we have an easy way to reset it. But that's what we have to tell them to do. But yeah, no, you're right, Chuck. I think, that's the right answer. It shouldn't allow you to the box should not be functional until you've set up a decent password. And it should reject, passwords that are too simple. But they just don't care enough. And, these decisions are getting, pushed down to somebody that doesn't know anything about security, and, isn't getting paid to know about security, and just doesn't care. And, ultimately the real problem is that, for stuff like that, is some of these devices are then hackable, and then, there's a societal problem, and they can be used for things like DDoS attacks and stuff like that. So it's not just a problem of that person's security. It's a problem for all of us on the usability of our overall network.
Jim, I guess I just feel like for certain things, passwords are one of them. Wi-Fi networks are another one. That there should be, as part of the setup process, there should be sirens blaring and, big red flashing screens that say, save your password, remember your password. Because I don't even have a problem with them allowing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because if you do that, that's on you. But the idea that they make it so darn easy to set something up and then, oh yeah, we'll just reset it.
That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I disagree, because in a lot of these cases, the downside may not be just to you; it may be to society generally. If these devices get hacked and then are, third-party actors, somebody, can hack 1 million refrigerators and, and then use that to attack a website. The person that owns a refrigerator is not really damaged. It's somebody else. And yeah, but the thing is, there should probably be a law. I'm not sure how you would write it, and then it would have to have some teeth, and somebody would have to enforce it. So right now, I mean, there is equipment that that does what you're saying and is responsible. But for so much of it, and a lot of it's not even built here, and maybe the software is not written by somebody that even speaks English or whatever, and they don't care. This is fire and forget, and they got their money, and they don't care. So it's a difficult, there's a lot of difficult problems, and this is one of them.
Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.